It's so interesting. I can actually see some of you. I left my glasses at home, okay? Good morning. I first would like to thank both Liz Caruso and Ed Wagaba for inviting us to be here this morning. This is the finale of Texi Talk, as you all know. So how many of you, I thought I was at the first one, only to learn I was actually at the fourth one. How many of you remember going to the one at the Hotel Pennsylvania when there was a nor'easter? The snow that night. Remember that night? Yeah, okay, so a few of you were there. So you probably, I hope you didn't think like I did that that was the first one. It was really the fourth one, okay? Let me talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. Let me introduce the team first. I'm very pleased to share the stage with Victoria Lacino and Ernie Kapanke. Victoria is the Program Director, Development Manager for Children's Miracle Network Hospitals at Cohen Children's Medical Center in the Long Island Market. Her expertise is with grassroots campaign fundraising, employee motivation, partner development, and stewardship. Victoria has been with CMN Hospitals for 4 years. You're going to love this, ladies and gentlemen. As a one-woman team, Victoria has increased the CMN program for Cohen Children's by approximately $600,000, raising more than $2.2 million. Told you you would love it, didn't I? She is creative and strategic in how she stewards her 22 partners, 8 events, and more than 1,000 locations. Victoria raised funds for the Muscular Dystrophy Association for 5 years before transferring to Cohen Children's. She currently resides on Long Island, New York, with her husband. You're going to love this as well. This is my favorite moment. Her favorite hobby is playing with her awesome toddler, Victor. As Senior Vice President at Eventive, Ernie Kapanke orchestrates innovative client campaigns with a concentration on consumer promotions and experiential marketing. As Head of Operations at Eventive, he leads the team in creating artistic, inventive, and memorable events that foster lasting relationships between brands and their audiences. I did not know this. I've known Ernie for many years. A private pilot in his spare time, Ernie segues between blue skies creativity and earthbound practicality. Is that a marketing person or not, right? And 20 years of consumer marketing and radio promotion experience means knowing which buttons to push and minutia to manage to get great programs to take flight, all while having fun doing it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our panel. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, thank you.
There are 4 areas that we're going to try to cover in this limited amount of time, and clearly we'll be outside if anybody has additional questions for us. But because this panel is all about sponsorship, we want to talk about how you begin the partnership, the proposal part of sponsorship, service the partnership objectives and benefits, the experiential, connecting, and engagement aspect, and lastly, the one big thing that I've discovered in all my years of working with sponsors are looking for how are you going to measure the relationship. Just by show of hands, how many of you actually sell sponsorship or do any type of sponsorship or exhibits at all? Okay, good, that's good to know. So Victoria, let's begin with you. For new partners, how does the proposal stage work with you? Is it a deck? How do you all begin?
So I'm in a unique position. I'm hired by Cohen to work on the Children's Miracle Network programs and partners. CMN nationally creates the partnership, but I work with all the partners locally. So AFLAC came on a couple of years ago for Children's Miracle Network, and they reached out to me about making a partnership locally. So they have that great combo of local and national exposure.
And believe it or not, listen, I was at a sponsorship conference 2 weeks ago, and that was one of the biggest things that I heard. Most of the partnerships were more national than local. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you can engage on both the local level and hopefully the national level as well. And Ernie, how about you? How do most of yours begin?
We are usually committed, but the brands already have a sponsorship deal in place where they have a sort of their marketing budget, and we're more in the activation implementation.
Okay.
There is some sponsorship that we influence, and a lot of that's done on a local level. So our budget, a large part of it is venue fees, and so that goes towards sponsorship. The most amount of activities or more number of events we can produce for that limited amount of money. And that isn't always in one market. We try to spread it out nationwide. So we're working with national brands, and they're committed. Sometimes we can leverage their national sponsorships, but we still have a local amount of money to spend as we travel across the country trying to implement, again, as many or spread it as thin as we can to get the most impact. So it varies. We work in concert with the client in trying to develop what it is that they want to accomplish with that
Okay.
money. In some cases, it might be promotion or development funds for future events. Always something that's on top of mind for many clients. But it usually is a presentation based on the type of event we're going to do, and then implementing the strategy of logistics to getting the most number of activities for that limited amount of money.
And when you say the type of event, it can be local, it can be regional. Are they street campaigns? What types of events are they?
Wide variety.
Okay.
So pleased to work with one of the large financial firms, and they make national sponsorships and then even local sponsorships. I heard earlier talking about the sports arenas and the conversations about sponsorships at that level and the importance of the entertainment venues. So you imagine those venues, you see the sponsorships at the football and baseball or music parks. What those brands are doing at that local level is where we come in. So we may not have sold a national sponsorship, or in some cases we've helped influence, but what they're doing on a daily basis. So it is local, to answer your question more directly, but what it is that the brand can do to meet the consumer in terms of either selling a bank account or expressing the healthcare needs, or oftentimes you've seen the car dealers and those guys also participate. So it's a variety, but yeah, definitely local. It can't get more local than a live event, because here we are face to face with the consumers.
Right. Okay, great. And Victoria, for you, talk about some of the benefits that you offer your sponsors.
Again, it depends on what the sponsor wants. We usually sit down with them before the campaign and we discuss how last year's program went and what can we do to improve and what would they like. And basically we can offer signage at the hospital or signage at an event, social media posts on the website, or naming rights at the hospital as well.
Oh, you can do naming rights at the hospital? Oh, how much is that, a 7-figure naming right deal?
Something like that.
Good to know. You talk in your bio about the fact that you steward your partners in a creative and strategic way. You have about 22 partners. How do you speak the language of sponsorship to 22 different partners?
It's more like a menu kind of to
Okay.
each partner. Whichever partner is really invested, those are who I invest in. And I see that they're passionate about such a great cause, children, of course, and what their needs are. So whoever is reaching out to me and they say, we want to do something so badly, we'll discuss and we'll take out a menu of, there's so many different ways to fundraise. So whether it being an ask of the customers or working with their vendors or just a straight sponsorship from the company.
So when sponsors come to you and they give you money, what do you all eventually do with those funds?
So all of my funds basically help, in my position, it helps the Child Life
Okay.
program, which kind of separates, that's what makes it a children's hospital, is this Child Life program. They're not a doctor, they're not a nurse, but they get on the level of the child and try to squash the fears of being in a hospital. So most of my funds fund that, but I also fund medical equipment or our pharmacy that we opened up and a new therapy or stuff like that.
Okay. On the question of objectives, clearly every sponsor wants something different, right? Do you work together to establish the objectives at the beginning of the partnership? Do they come to you with objectives already established and ask you to help deliver those? How does it work? Ernie?
Prefer?
Very similarly, it's a conversation first and understand,
Right.
it's the sales technique of understanding what it is they want to be sold.
Okay.
So whereas you can fashion a program or sponsorship based on the venue's needs, but in the case of the sponsors, they may not want naming rights as an example.
Right.
They might rather put that money toward you to use somewhere else. So you've got to customize, and customization is a big term. That means personalization to each sponsorship deal. Start with the conversation, identify what the needs are, and then try to identify whether or not the value of having the website activity or the naming rights, or in case of the venues, we might want more access. If there were a venue where we had multiple access to multiple exits, and that may be a chance for us to meet the consumer, because you're talking about a large sporting venue might have 50,000 people. Well, that might, 20 different access points
Right,
means
right.
that there might be a need for 20 different accesses
Right.
to be able to have a conversation. So those type of things are the specifics that come into play when you're trying to organize a sponsorship that's relative to each sponsor's needs.
Right. How about you?
Sometimes it's VIP and sometimes that doesn't really
Right.
matter, right?
Right, no, it's, you see what the partner wants. You have your own of, this is what I can offer you, and then you just come to a good agreement on what would make both of you happy, so.
On the question of timing, I saw a few hands that people said they actually do sponsorship. One of the things that I've been seeing in recent years is sponsors want more time to actually put you into their budgets. There was a time when 6 to 9 months would work. Now the number that I'm hearing, maybe some of you are hearing something different, is 18 months, ladies and gentlemen, okay? How about you? What are you looking at?
Each partner, again, is very different, so I will think about my budget for next year and in October, and then I'll start reaching out to some of my partners, and maybe they will also be planning around that same time in October. But then you also have those partners that are like, oh, it's the end of the year, we have this extra money, what shall we do with? So
We like extra money, right?
so it really depends on the partner, but sometimes I do reach out 18 months beforehand.
Okay, and how about you, Ernie? Because
Well-
you're on the agency side.
Absolutely, and it's both, to answer your question, but on a national level, they're going to make a commitment, and then that will usually be a multi-year commitment. So once they commit to something, it's going to go down a path for a while, so that money is tied up. And so the sponsorship opportunities are, less likely at the national scale. But once they've committed to that, then on a local level, those decisions are still being made 6 to 12 months.
Okay.
So if your sponsorship or your venue opportunity is within that paradigm, then we can still talk within the year. But if they're going left and you sell something that's on the right, we're probably out of luck for that sponsor for a couple of years.
I mean, you have 8 events. I mean, Ernie, at any given time, how many events are you all working on?
Hundreds,
Okay.
but it's different scale.
Right.
So we might be negotiating a $500 sponsorship, but that's important because we're committing thousands of dollars to be there.
Right.
And each sponsorship is very valuable to us because each consumer means something very specific to the brands. So I'm, literally signing hundreds of contracts in a year and quickly evaluating which ones are valuable for the right reasons. But obviously the ones that have 6 figures and 7 figures are taking more time to negotiate and they last longer. So there's definitely more impact in that sense. But we don't undervalue or don't want to overstate the value of each event because of the opportunity to meet. And we're talking events are valuable in their own way because of the personal conversations.
And let's talk a little bit about servicing the partnership. You talked about signage and a list of benefits that you provide to your partners. But Ernie's an agency. Have any of your sponsors ever come to you and said, oh, I want you to work with this agency to be certain that you deliver everything that we've talked about in the sponsorship agreement?
I haven't, I'm not on, we have a whole nother department, the events team.
Okay.
That would probably work with that, but most of my events are, like I said, through Children's Miracle Network, so they're already set up. So we have dance marathons, which I'm in the season right now, and
I'm in.
they're a lot of fun, and a lot of colleges, and even a young professional group in New York City does one. So, it depends on, again,
On the sponsor?
On the sponsor.
Right. Ernie, and for you, let's talk about activation. Are you always the agency that activates it, or do they sometimes ask you to work with another agency? How does that
Certainly, yeah,
work?
no, you've got to play well in the sandbox
Okay.
for a lot of things. And it depends in the terms of implementing a sponsorship. A lot of times another agency will be representing the brand or the venue. I can think of, as a big example we might be familiar with is the New York City Marathon, right? Huge event.
Right.
Obviously, there's a large expo at the convention center, and then there's a lot of activities surrounding that. Well, there are multiple agencies involved in that, and I'm only representing one brand, a small fraction of that, so we need to not only work with the advertising agencies and then the PR team and then the social club, all those guys getting the message out, but then we got to turn and work with competitors in a sense to make sure that our presence at the venues, at the expos, and in the street is at full value. So yeah, we find a niche, and everyone's got a place to play. And I think we're all servicing the clients in our own way and be able to kind of bring full value to the sponsorship. So we absolutely have to work together with even competitors, and I don't find that a bad thing.
Okay, well, that brings up an interesting question, though. If you have so many different agencies in the room representing sometimes the same brand, but providing a different role, then who takes the lead?
Whomever the client chooses. We serve with the pleasure of the clients, right?
Okay.
Typically, though, it's pretty well worked out before the actual event day. And there might be we still often have communication calls where multiple agencies are on the phone coordinating that message. So it depends on what part of the activation, what part of the sponsorship is taking place. If it's on the ground, then it's probably our team, right?
Okay.
What is the physical manifestation of that brand sponsorship? We can handle that. But when the media shows up, I know exactly who I'm going to turn to.
Right.
And it's great. There's a celebrity on site. I know that this person's going to help support and coach the person to be present and make sure that it goes smoothly as well. So each person plays a role, even at any time we might take the lead.
Okay. Aren't you glad you don't have that challenge? There's a big word more and more, ladies and gentlemen, in the past few years about experiential and engagement. For our audience, Ernie, how much of this language should they be speaking to potential sponsors?
I think it's pretty large, particularly because we all like events, right? The value of live activity and the chance to interact face-to-face means so much. It's so meaningful. We're hearing that not only generationally, but it's a thrill to be present to be something, right? You can be in the room to see this, or you can have read about it tomorrow in the paper, and it's obviously more memorable to be live and face-to-face. So when you're crafting a sponsorship, the things that jump out are obviously the engagement, the opportunity to brand different experiences, customize experiences if possible throughout your venue or your festival, and then price, and the impact that it's specific to what our brands can take advantage of.
How about you? Because I know you do golf tournaments, you do a variety of events.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the biggest part of engagement is just connecting to the cause. So I always try to introduce them to some of the ambassadors that represent for Cohen, or bring them on a tour to the hospital to see why it's so important that we need the funds, why it benefits them as well.
Okay.
And why it's so, why I'm so passionate about it. And usually, whenever you get those more engaged people, then the funds are increased.
Right. I think I've been giving a 2-minute, ladies and gentlemen, so I want to move into measurement. Very quickly, how do you measure the campaigns that you work on behalf of sponsors?
Eyeballs or interactions is always valuable, right? Because in a sense, we're still in media,
Right.
part of the media landscape. So the value of the number of people that can be brought to our exhibit, obviously the number of people represented at the venue is very valuable to us. But how many interacted with what we did? How many widgets were distributed? How many widgets were sold? How many dollars were raised? Mm-hmm. Those are the things that ultimately matter most. And if we can track that with data capture, sure. But I would recommend if the venues or sponsorships could also integrate some third-party research, that's a very valuable thing that is believed by the brands.
Agree.
So if that could be part of the sponsorship, then I'm all for it.
How about you?
Sure. So again, how many eyeballs, how many people attend, of course the dollars that are raised, but I think it's really important to have, after an event, an impact report sent to those people.
Nice.
Say, hey, we did have 7,000 people attend. We had 3,000 people reshare it on their Facebook. So definitely giving those measurements in an impact report is really important.
Great, wonderful. Do we have time for a question, maybe one or two? 1 minute, okay. Does anyone have a question? Please. Tell us who you're with and your name, please.
Oh, my name's Candace Bass, and Toliver Candy, and I'm with Expo right now, which is getting started. We're really time for Expo last Saturday. Sponsorship has been very difficult because it's very late, and I'm just wondering, what would you do? How would you sell sponsorship? How do you get out there when no one knows you and you're just starting? And I don't have a 18-month window at this point.
When is your event?
We just had it last Saturday.
Okay.
And the next one is July 14th, and then Philly, we're going to South Carolina in August, and then Atlanta's in October.
Okay.
So,
You want to go ahead?
I was going to say, attending an event like this is really powerful, because I was just sitting in the lounge area and I met somebody from Godiva, so I'm hoping to form a partnership with Godiva now. So I'd say attending different networking events and things like this to help just, can I give 5 minutes? This is what my product is. It's amazing, and get in the door that way.
Ernie?
From a competitive standpoint, you know your brand better than anyone else, right? So you have to advocate. Maybe the way to get started, though, I know you're struggling with what to do next. maybe I'd say, what other like-minded events or like yours, who are sponsoring them, who are their competitors, and then work up a list, and just got to work the phones. But I think obviously networking is strong, but I would think maybe strategically set up a plan that maybe gives you some targets to aim for, because otherwise, if you can't get started, you don't know where to start, just those first couple steps is all you really need to take. Good luck to you.
The one thing I would add to that is look at the value of trying to find a partner, because these are regional events for the most part, right? So I would try to find a partner that might be regional to all of the locations that you are going to go, and then make them perhaps a title sponsor or one of your umbrella sponsors, and then that way you give them benefits no matter where you take this particular event. Okay? We have time for one more? No? He says I don't have time for one more. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.